Hello and welcome to the second video about Genshin Impact version 3.6. This was supposed to be the last video of the series, but there will be a part 3 because the whole video was more than 40 minutes long, so I decided to split it. Last time we talked about Nahida's second story quest, Sapientia Oromastis Act 2, so everything about Apep and the elemental dragons. Today we're talking about the extremely long and extremely rich in info war quest, Khvarena of Good and Evil. Of course, if you haven't played the quest yet, you might wanna come back later to avoid spoilers. As always, this is a theory video. I use information available in the game, but my theories and deductions are the fruit of my personal research and interpretation, so they're not to be considered the official lore of the game unless I got something right and it's confirmed in later updates of the game. So, this video will cover two main topics, Khvarena and the Narzissenkreuz Institute of Fontaine, while part 3 will be all about, of course, Khaenri'ah. Without further ado, let's start right away with the first topic. What is Khvarena? Khvarena is a different power compared to that of the elements, and it assimilates whatever energy it comes into contact with. Both the powers of Khvarena and that of the Abyss are the same, although they are opposites. They both are the results of this power being projected into Teyvat, and they both have a similar form of self-recognition. Rene's deductions are confirmed by the fact that the divine bird Simurgh flew into the Amrita pool to purify from the corruption of the Abyss, and the motes of Khvarena that were born as a consequence are capable of purifying or nullifying the power of the Abyss. This was also confirmed by the bizarre transcript that we found near Furious campsite, on which we can read that Khvarena can eliminate or reverse the power of the Abyss, and that they are powers of the same level that have the power to rewrite rules. Talking about the divine bird Simurgh, where does Khvarena come from? Before Nabu Malikata and King Deshret decided to acquire forbidden knowledge to rebel against the Heavenly Principles, Nabu Malikata had a prophetic dream in which she encountered a faceless nightmare. The consequences of the cataclysm were not stopped, and this frightened her. That's when Khvarena, Nabu Malikata's innocent daughter, was born, or more specifically, she was separated from her body to prevent that nightmare from ever happening. Nabu Malikata told Khvarena that she was going to give her to another mother, Rukkhadevata. She then told her about her prophetic dream and what her destiny was, that is to sacrifice herself to fight against the dark power. Back then, Nabu Malikata already knew that Khvarena would have split into countless modes, which would have made her immortal, but also that both Rukkhadevata and the original Hydra Archon would have died before Khvarena's sacrifice and would have been forgotten. Now, Rukkhadevata was indeed forgotten, but what about the god of justice? Are we going to erase her as well since she was corrupted? Anyway, Nabu Malikata then gave Rukkhadevata Khvarena, a shard that carries the wisdom of the flowers, the veins of the skies, and the pure essence of life, to protect her until the time when she would fulfill her destiny. Nabu Malikata told Rukkhadevata about what she saw in the dream. When both Deshret and herself will be dead, the humans will summon a chaotic darkness that she is unable to predict. The rise of the dark abyss that, differently from the natural cycle of life and death, will drown all life, the only evil capable of crushing life completely. After Nabu Malikata and Deshret died, Rukkhadevata forged Khvarena into the divine bird Simurgh, tasking her with the protection of a section of the rainforest and the guardianship of the border between new birth and death. Simurgh then slumbered, dreaming of the time where the three gods of Sumeru were still happily together, until the ones who must not be approached brought the Great Death, the Cataclysm. Now, there are two versions of the same story here. Nasijuna said that the Khaenri'ahs built a facility that connected them to the realms beyond. Later, monsters swarmed that facility and spread to the nations of Teyvat, and tore open a rift, the Tunigi Hollow, that was stopped by the new vein of the ancient tree. Soros instead said that during the cataclysm, dark fire rose from the earth and scorched the land, opening a bottomless hollow, the Tunigi Hollow again, and demons of death crawled through that until it was blocked by the ancient tree or trees that sealed and subdued the dark depths. But the trees were unable to completely stop the corruption from spreading. The trees were also corrupted and they transformed into the huge grey crystals. The problem here is that Nasejuna's knowledge about the events comes from the Lector of the Abyss Order, so he seems a little bit more reliable about this than Soros, since Turban basically told us that Soros didn't really remember or understand the history of the party, and that she was guessing things, but in the end both versions of the story are pretty much similar, so it's not that big of a deal. By the way, interestingly, Soros defined the power of the Abyss as dark and painful memories, which actually makes sense if you consider that everything in Teyvat works, and in this case stops working, because of memories. Back to the story, just as Nabu Malikata's prophesied, the darkness spread all over Teyvat and Simurgh awakened. During the cataclysm, the god of justice, the Hydra Archon, was slain and her body was transformed into the Amrita Pool. As to why the Amrita Pool is in the Girdle of Sand, it's kinda obvious. The Hydra Archon was probably leaving Khaenri'ah when she died, since the Amrita Pool is almost exactly above the huge Khaenri'ah gates that we found. Anyway, because of the power of the Abyss, the Amrita Pool was about to dry up. That's when Rukkhadevata, with no time to mourn the death of her friend, the Hydra Archon, used her power to create the Harvest Token from the Amrita Pool. The Harvest Token is a secret form of the god that generated the Pari, so the Hydra Archon. As we said, she died during the cataclysm, but she wasn't able to return to the cycle of life and death because although she sacrificed herself to quell the Abyss, she was corrupted by it, and her consciousness still lingered. That's why Rukkhadevata created the Harvest Token, so that the god of justice could be anchored to this realm. Now, because the Amrita Pool was, as a consequence, also corrupted, the divine bird Simurgh flew into it, which caused the pool to be purified, but also Simurgh to shatter into motes of Khvarena and into a glimmering sea of flowers that carried the wishes of her three mothers, Rukkhadevata, the Hydra Archon, and Nabu Malikata. Before moving on to the next chapter, there's obviously one huge question that we need to face. Why does a shard of Nabu Malikata have the same and opposite power as that of the Abyss, that is to rewrite the rules of Teyvat? Well, we do know that Nabu Malikata was a Seelie, a race of higher beings that lived in the Lunar Palace a very long time ago. They were cast down on Teyvat and cursed after a catastrophe that happened millennia ago, more specifically around the time the Celestial Nails were sent down, since Nabu Malikata herself, a survivor of the curse, arrived on Teyvat and walked in the desert for days, and the desert was created by the Celestial Nail that fell on Mount Damavand. What does that tell us? That the Seelie were probably the envoys of the gods and had similar powers as them, or that maybe they were direct creation of the Shades. We don't really know for sure why they were cursed, but in the records of Jayan, we are told about the ancestor of the Seelie who met a traveler from afar, which sounds like a descender, and I think it's the twin sister that became the queen of the Kingdom of Darkness for a simple reason. The two twins from the Battle Pass arrived in Teyvat when Dragonspine was a lush mountain, so back during Salvindagnir's time, and Nabu Malikata was cast down after the Celestial Nails came down, so the timing is just right. Then let's add the fact that the twins are descenders, because they came from the kingdom among the heavens, and after they arrived, Teyvat was engulfed by the first, or maybe second actually, instance of forbidden knowledge, which descenders are immune to. That's also why I think that Imolakar is the other twin, but that's not important right now. Back to the story in the records of Jayan, the Seelie and the Traveler fell in love and got married in the Lunar Palace with the Three Moon Sisters as witnesses of this union. 30 days later, a disaster struck, and both the Seelie and the Traveler were cursed never to meet again, and their memories were wiped. The memory wipe is another reason why I think the Traveler is a twin sister from the Battle Pass, since
the memory of her noble origins faded.
The Seelie's body and mind instead withered, leaving fragments of itself all over the world that will forever sing their song of grief. And these are the Seelie that we encounter. The story of the Seelie is gonna be relevant in my next video as well, so keep it in mind for now. Before moving on, if you're curious about this stone, it doesn't say what Sosi says it does. It reads Anirodam, Anutpadam, Anukedam, Asasvatam, which means non-ceasing, non-arising, non-annihilation, non-permanence, and it's the first line of the dedicatory verse of the Mula Madhyamaka Karika, the foundational text of the Madhyamaka school of the Mahayana Buddhist philosophy, which was written by the Indian philosopher Nagarjuna. The dedication verse salutes the fully enlightened one, and the whole text's purpose is to eliminate conceptual proliferation, reification, that is treating the abstract as a physical thing, and hypostatization, that is giving a real identity to a concept. Now let's go back to something we talked about at the beginning of the video, Rene's investigation notes. Back during the Cataclysm, most likely after Seymour sacrificed herself, an expedition from Fontaine explored the Khaenri'ah facility in the Girdle of Sand. The members of the expeditions were Rene, a kid of about 12 years old, give or take, Jacob, who was just a child, and Carl, unknown, but I do think he was something like an explorer that was accompanying them. There they found something they called the Sacred Lotus that was similar to both Rene and Jacob's body composition but was almost completely different to Carl's one. The two kids analyzed the power of Khvarena and they found out that it was the same but opposite power as that of the Abyss. The exact word has been redacted, but I think it didn't just say the word Abyss, because the Abyss power is no news for us. Rather, I think they wrote the actual name of what we call the Abyss, which reminds me of the Traveler Quest Chapter 3 Act 6, Caribert, where everything that had to do with the sinner was about fate. 3 out of 4 quests were called Destined Encounter, A Lamenter at Fate's End, Portended Fate. The Cryo-Lector was called Fortune Lector, Secret Keeper of Fate's End, and he said that fate hadn't granted us the right to enter and he granted us the Trial of Destiny. The sinner said that he knows our fate well, although I still think he was talking to Lumine, and in the end, Caribert became the Loom of Fate, so I still think that both the sinner and the Abyss power are fate. Back to Rene, they discovered that the facility produced azesite, a type of lock of relatively stable and safe energy that was originally meant to be used for the field tillers, the Ruin Guards. According to Rene, the results were not impressive because azesite is a pure elemental force, so it lacked any kind of will. Then Rene starts talking about most likely Jacob. He seems to have some kind of power that, if used, it would infuriate someone. It also seems that Jacob is extremely resistant to the power of the Abyss, but for some reason it's seen as a normal occurrence. Jacob's power seems to be life-threatening, since Rene is trying to preserve its life, and the adults see this power as wrong. This makes me think that something, maybe a power similar to that of the Abyss, was injected inside Jacob's body. You know, something like what Kali had to go through with the remnants of the god. After Rene regained consciousness because he forgot to eat and fainted, Jacob forgot something or did something he forgot he wasn't supposed to do, and Carl became suspicious of them. Now it seems that Rene and Jacob are keeping Carl out of the truth to the point that they created a fake journal, and also pretended that Jacob needed to eat to supplement his nutritional intake, even though there's actually no need. Why wouldn't Jacob need to eat in the first place? Anyway, here things start getting a little cryptic. Rene talks about 2 flood periods, the first of which flooded the courtyard, which honestly makes little sense to me. A possibility could be that the first flood was just an accident that happened at the Institute, while the second one is the Cataclysm, since Rene said that homes very far apart have been flooded because of it. The kids then ran calculations about what they found many times but with the same result, destruction. But Rene found a potential breakthrough in his research. If they changed the refinement method and extracted the will within the Abyss power, they would be able to resist the impact of whatever they deduced that would bring destruction, a larger catastrophe that must be avoided with a plan that only Rene and Jacob, together with Alain, can execute. To explain the objective of Rene's expedition, I came up with 2 potential ideas. Hypothesis 1. Something was about to come crashing down from the sky above Fontaine, which honestly makes me think that Celestia, the floating island, may had some problems and was losing its floating power, so they needed some kind of sentient power to prevent it from falling, hence the impact he talks about. Hypothesis 2. The special kind of water in Fontaine was the original Hydra Archon's product, or it worked thanks to her powers. Now that she's dead, the water was losing its power and was disappearing. If Fontaine City is built on the water, it would have fallen and impacted with the bottom of the lake, so they needed some kind of sentient power to substitute the missing power from the water. This theory opens up to 2 more hypotheses. Either this problem still exists, which would explain why the people are still looking for alternative power sources to solve Fontaine's problems, or this is hinting at the birth of the current Hydra Archon, since Rene was specifically looking for a power with a will of its own. Anyway, Rene's story, complicated and encrypted as it is connected to the new artifact set called Nymph's Dream. Now, the story, as far as I can tell, is a mix of real events and a children's game. It tells us the story of the Narzissenkreuz Institute of Fontaine, directed by two unnamed women, the director and the vice director, who set out on a journey against the cataclysm to defeat the evil at its source. Other members of the institute also departed to fight and prevent this catastrophe from ever happening again. Some of these members were taken by the Marechaussee Phantom or Special Security and Surveillance Patrol. In our world, the Marechaussee actually exists, and it's the national gendarmerie of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, called Koninklijke Marechaussee. Interestingly, it was instituted during the Ancien Regime under the name of Marechaussee, and later, during the French Revolution, it was renamed to Gendarmerie. If you've watched my video about Fontaine, you know that the nation is most likely based on the events of the French Revolution, so this makes complete sense. Anyway, other members of the Narzissenkreuz were taken by explorers, and together they became adventurers that reached the edge of the world. These members then, after many years from the cataclysm, decided to learn and use the secrets of ancient machinery and bodies of steel to prevent a new cataclysm from ever happening, while other members of the institute instead decided to embark on journeys beyond normal comprehension so that these tragedies may happen again, all in the name of the nymphs, which we don't really know what or who they are. Another story tells of the feather of an unknown bird species that was on the vice director's hat, a feather that the kids of the institute really liked. Before she set out to fight against the cataclysm, she gave the feather to one of the kids for safekeeping, with the promise that she will come back for it. The name of the kid has been redacted, which means that it's going to be a relevant character in Genshin Impact. The artifact says that the feather followed the new owner of the feather, the kid, and reached the source of that which caused the calamity of parting, before returning to whence it came. So my interpretation is that the kid set out on a journey and reached the source of the cataclysm, where they found the body of the vice director and put the feather back on her hat. Even Rene and Jacob thought that the vice director would not be able to survive the power of the abyss. Then there's the pocket watch, that is very interesting. It was owned by a child who loved machines, and it was gifted to someone who later fell into the primordial liquid that dissolves all. Remember this liquid because it will come back later. The pocket watch also tells us a story that seems to be a story invented by the kids of the institute while playing. It talks about a dragon, Narcissus, that yearned for the princess who decided to plunge herself and the high tower where she lived in a dreamless sleep to prevent the dragon from obtaining her. The dragon then looked everywhere for her treasure, but it was protected by heroes. It was a pearl of water from which a tiny life was born. Now this could be a simple story, but it could also be a hint at the birth of the Hydra Archon and another elemental dragon like a pet, but we have far too little information about it. The teacup talks about a new child that arrived at the institute. The first person she met was the director, but she was introduced to the other kids by the vice director as they were snacking while on a break from playing. Now before the last artifact, I do wanna say something. I'm starting to believe that the child that loved machines grew up to become one of the members of the institute that learned the secrets of machinery and bodies of steel, but also embarked on a journey beyond normal comprehension so that the cataclysm may happen again. And yes, you may have realized that I think this person is Sandrone. The other kid though, the new kid that arrived at the institute, may be the one the vice director gave her feather to. In the story, the vice director told this kid to watch over another kid, which I think it's still Sandrone. I'm thinking that maybe the Narzissenkreuz Institute produced yet another Fatui Harbinger, Arlecchino. Think about it, this kid seems to have been very close to the vice director, and the Narzissenkreuz Institute does seem to be an orphanage for special kids, or kids with special origins or powers. You know, something like the Xavier School for Gifted Youngsters. And Arlecchino does run an orphanage in Snezhnaya to raise kids as members of the Fatui. It kinda fits a little bit too well, but once again, too little information to be certain about it. Now the last artifact, the dragon's monocle, is extremely interesting. The dragon of this story fell into the chasm that dissolves all things, which sounds like the primordial liquid from before. Before dying, the dragon remembered the time it spent with the hero and told him that it has seen sights that he has never seen before, which is the reason why he decided to stop it. It also talks about the star beasts that will drink the amniotic fluid of the world dry and all life on the surface will be wiped away in 100 years. The dragon will return to save all souls, and it will be reborn as the new universe. Then the story shifts to the hero who, although victorious, will never believe anything that human knowledge can't fully comprehend, and to the end of his days, he will build a kingdom powered by machines and energies not derived from the elements. Okay, interpretation time. First of all, I'd really like to have an idea about the primordial fluid that dissolves everything, but the only thing I can think of is just lava, mainly because of Albedo's trailer since it talks about the origin of the world and lava is shown. It could be talking about Natlan since 2 children of the Institute reached this place, or it could be something that exists in the Abyss, but we do have too little information to work with. Then, the evil dragon may not be an actual dragon like a pet, but just a narrative device for children to clearly distinguish the good guy from the bad guy. There were 2 people, 2 companions, who traveled together until erosion had the best of one of them, the evil dragon, who let the other one, the hero, slay him before hatred could fill him. The evil dragon doesn't seem to be a normal human being since erosion was involved, but also because he will be reborn. Since the hero is clearly the founder of Khaenri'ah, we're talking about something that happened, once again, during the Envoy Age, when Salvindagnir fell and the scribe Ukko placed his oath for revenge against the heavens upon the new nation without gods that was being built back then. About the star beasts that the dragon talks about, considering the scarcity of information, I would instinctively think that they are the travelers, because their presence in Tevat is, like any other descender, a huge risk for the world. On the other hand though, considering that the hero is the founder of Khaenri'ah and that not long after the nation started being built, a huge catastrophe happened that almost destroyed the whole planet, opening rifts everywhere and forcing the heavens to send down the celestial nails, I could think that the star beasts are actually the true twins from the Battle Pass. I mean, based on what we see in the Battle Pass video and on what we read in the records of Julian, the twin sister is most likely the cause of the end of the Silly race and, as a consequence, the cause of the first or second instance of forbidden knowledge. About the dragon's name, Narcissus, it's obviously a reference to the Greek myth of Echo and Narcissus. Narcissus was a handsome young man who hadn't been able to find the love of his life. When he was born, his mother, the nymph Liriope, had been warned by a seer that Narcissus would have lived a long life as long as he had never discovered himself. One day, while in the woods, he encountered the mountain nymph Echo, who was previously cursed by Hera, Zeus's wife, to be able to say only the last few words that someone else just said. Because of the curse, Narcissus thought that she was mocking him and sent her away. Heartbroken, Echo ran away and spent the rest of her days in lonely valleys until there was nothing left of her but her voice. Nemesis, the goddess of revenge, heard about what happened and, out of revenge, led Narcissus to a spring with clear and calm waters. Narcissus decided to drink some water from it, but he saw his reflection for the first time. He was surprised by the looks of his face to the point that he got obsessed with it. He kept staring at his own reflection, unable to move, because he knew that, if he left, he would have lost the love of his life that he had been looking for and had finally found, so he accepted his fate. He laid on the grass and, as his life was flowing away from his body, a flower grew in that precise spot, the Narcissus. Keep this story in mind because I'll come back to it in a minute. Now, is the dragon from the story an actual elemental dragon? Who knows, but there is a chance that it could be, since the dragon sovereigns are being reborn as a new generation of dragon lords like the Valin. In case you were wondering, I did think that the dragon from the story was Nibelung, but the timing doesn't match with what Apep told us. I won't exclude though the possibility that the dragon from the story could have been one of the elemental dragons that survived the war against the Outsiders. The dragon may have looked for forbidden knowledge like Apep did, and maybe it encountered the sinner who showed it the truth of Tevat. The dragon then changed and the hero saw it as an enemy and slew it, but like the other elemental dragons, will be reborn in the future. Anyway, 100 years later, the star beasts did arrive, the heir from the Battle Pass, and whatever they did caused the rifts to become extremely dangerous, so the celestial nails were sent down, wiping out civilization throughout the world, while in the meantime the hero had already started building Khaenri'ah. Apep's story, on the other hand, seems to be about the war between the Primordial One and the Second who came, so millennia before these events. Going back to Narcissus Myth in Greek mythology, we could think that, considering how Narcissus was obsessed with his reflection in the water, the dragon from the artifact set may be the actual water dragon who died in the past, probably in the abyss at this point, and is supposed to come back to life in Enkanomiya as a human, since Enkanomiya is technically between Teyvat and the abyss. And now it's time for the last and biggest question of the video. Why is Fontaine so closely connected to Khaenri'ah? I mean, why do the children from the Narzissenkreuz Institute of Fontaine, like Jacob, have a high resistance to the abyss power? Sadly, we don't have too much to work with right now, so the answer to this question will probably arrive once we get to Fontaine. And that's it. I hope you liked the video. If you did, don't forget to leave a thumbs up, and if you enjoy Genshin Impact Theory videos, consider subscribing. I tried something new and different for this video, as you may have noticed. I asked my brother for help and I basically went for a cinematic look, trying to reenact what the story said. Let me know in the comments if you enjoyed it. Anyway, I'm already working on part 3, the one about Khaenri'ah, so I should be able to upload it next week. 98% of the commentary is already recorded, so I just need to record what I added and edit the video. Well then, thanks for watching, and until next time, over and out.